Hello, friend. Come in from the cold. My name is Clara Bennett, and I'm 78 years old now. Every December, when the first snow begins to fall and the scent of pine and cinnamon fills the air, I find myself thinking about that Christmas. The one that changed everything. The one that brought me Daniel. Pour yourself something warm. Tea, cocoa, whatever brings you comfort. Settle in somewhere cozy. Maybe you can hear the wind outside. Or perhaps you're lucky enough to have snow falling softly against your window. Either way, let yourself relax. This story has waited over 50 years to be told properly, and it will be here whether you hear every word or drift off to dreams of winter magic. This isn't a story about perfect people or fairy tale romance, though it certainly felt like magic at the time. This is a story about two lonely souls who found each other during the loneliest season in a small mountain town where Christmas wasn't just a holiday. It was a lifeline of hope during the coldest, darkest time of year. It's about second chances, about healing, about learning that sometimes the best gifts are the ones you never knew you needed. So close your eyes if you'd like. Let the gentle rhythm of my voice carry you somewhere peaceful. Imagine a small town nestled in the mountains, where the snow falls thick and soft, where every house glows with warm light, where the smell of wood smoke and baking fills the air. Let me take you back to December of 1972, to the worst and best Christmas of my life, to the winter I learned that sometimes you have to lose everything to find what truly matters. This is the Snowfall Promise, a Christmas love story to fall asleep to. December had always been my favorite month, or at least it used to be. I was 26 years old in the winter of 1972, and I'd just experienced what some people might call the worst year of my life. My mother had passed away in February after a long illness. My engagement had ended in July. My fiancé, Robert, had decided he wanted someone less complicated, which was his way of saying he couldn't handle grief. And in October, I'd lost my job at the library in Boston when budget cuts forced them to let go of their junior staff. By December, I felt like a shell of myself, empty, going through motions, existing, but not really living. My aunt, my mother's older sister, called me the first week of December. Aunt Margaret lived in a small town in the mountains of Vermont called Pine Haven. Population 847. Though she always joked it was more like 800 in winter, when the seasonal residents went back to the cities. "Clara," she said, her voice warm and concerned, "I know this has been a terrible year for you, sweetheart. Why don't you come spend Christmas with me? The mountain air will do you good. The quiet will help you heal. And frankly, I could use the company." I almost said no. The thought of pretending to be cheerful through the holidays felt exhausting. But then I looked around my small Boston apartment, the boxes I still hadn't unpacked from moving to a cheaper place, the pictures I'd taken down because they hurt too much to look at, and I realized I couldn't stay there. Not for Christmas. not surrounded by reminders of everything I'd lost. "Okay," I said. "I'll come." "Wonderful," Aunt Margaret said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Come as soon as you can. Stay as long as you need. My door is always open to you, Clara. You know that." I packed 2 suitcases, mostly warm clothes, a few books, my mother's favorite scarf that still smelled faintly of her perfume, and caught a bus north 3 days later. The journey took most of the day, from Boston to Montpelier, then a smaller bus that wound up into the mountains, climbing higher and higher until my ears popped and the world outside the window transformed into something from a storybook. Snow-covered evergreens, frozen streams, mountains that seemed to touch the sky. Pine Haven appeared as the afternoon light was fading. The bus dropped me at the general store in the center of town, and I stood there with my suitcases, taking it all in. It was like stepping back in time. The main street was lined with old-fashioned storefronts, decorated for Christmas, wreaths on every door, strings of lights draped across the street, a massive Christmas tree in the town square, already lit, even though it wasn't quite dark yet. There was a church with a white steeple, a post office that looked like it had been there since the 1800s, a small diner with steamed-up windows, and the snow. God, the snow was everywhere. Not the gray, slushy stuff we got in Boston, but pristine white powder that sparkled in the fading light, covering everything like a soft blanket. Clara, Aunt Margaret, appeared from the general store, bundled in a thick coat and colorful scarf, her white hair escaping from beneath a knitted hat. She pulled me into a fierce hug that smelled like vanilla and wool. "Oh, sweetheart, you made it. Let me look at you." She pulled back, and I saw her face fall slightly as she took in my appearance. I knew what she was seeing. I'd lost weight, had dark circles under my eyes, hadn't been sleeping well. The grief and heartbreak had worn me down to something fragile and hollow. "Well," she said, recovering quickly, "we'll get some good food in you and some mountain air in your lungs. You'll feel better in no time. Come on, the truck's just over here." Aunt Margaret's house was a 10-minute drive from town, up a winding road that led higher into the mountains. It was a beautiful old farmhouse, 2 stories with a wraparound porch, smoke curling from the chimney, warm light glowing from every window. "It's not fancy," Aunt Margaret said as we pulled up, "but it's home, and it's yours for as long as you need it." Inside was exactly what I needed, without knowing I needed it. The house was warm and cozy, with exposed beam ceilings and a massive stone fireplace. Aunt Margaret had already started decorating for Christmas. A tree stood in the corner of the living room, half decorated, boxes of ornaments waiting nearby. Greenery draped the mantel. The whole house smelled like cinnamon and pine and wood smoke. "Your room is upstairs, second door on the right," Aunt Margaret said. "Same room you stayed in when you visited as a girl. Why don't you get settled and I'll make us some dinner? We're having pot roast and apple pie for dessert, because if you can't have pie during the holidays, when can you have it?" I carried my suitcases upstairs and found the room exactly as I remembered it from childhood visits. A double bed with a quilt, a window overlooking the forest behind the house, a small desk, a braided rug on the wooden floor. Simple and perfect. I unpacked slowly, hanging clothes in the closet, putting my books on the nightstand. My mother's scarf I draped over the back of the desk chair where I could see it. Then I sat on the bed and looked out the window at the darkening forest, at the snow beginning to fall again, soft and silent. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Dinner with Aunt Margaret was comfortable and undemanding. She didn't push me to talk about my mother or Robert or anything difficult. Instead, she told me about Pine Haven, about the neighbors, the town characters, the Christmas traditions that the community held on to like treasures. There's the Christmas market every Saturday in December, she said, passing me more pot roast. Crafts, baked goods, that sort of thing. The town does a caroling night where everyone walks house to house singing. And on Christmas Eve, there's a candlelight service at the church that's absolutely beautiful. Everyone goes, even people who don't consider themselves particularly religious. It's more about community than anything else. It sounds nice, I said, and meant it. It is nice, Aunt Margaret agreed. This town, it takes care of its own, especially during the holidays. When things get dark and cold, people here know how to find the light. After dinner, Aunt Margaret insisted I rest while she cleaned up. I tried to help, but she shooed me away. You're exhausted, sweetheart. Go read by the fire, sleep, whatever you need. I settled into the armchair by the fireplace with a book, but I couldn't focus on the words. Instead, I found myself staring at the flames, listening to the wind outside, letting the warmth and peace of the house seep into my bones. The next few days passed in a gentle, healing rhythm. I'd wake to the smell of coffee and Aunt Margaret's pancakes or oatmeal. We'd have leisurely breakfasts. Then I'd bundle up and go for walks through the property, down to the road, sometimes into town. The cold air and physical movement felt good after months of barely leaving my apartment. I'd walk for hours sometimes, just me and the snow and the mountains, letting my thoughts quiet, letting the grief flow through me instead of trying to hold it back. Aunt Margaret was the perfect companion. She gave me space when I needed it, company when I wanted it, and never once pushed me to cheer up or get over it. She understood that healing took time, that grief had its own schedule. It was on one of these walks into town, 4 days after I'd arrived, that I first saw him. I'd stopped at the general store to pick up some things for Aunt Margaret: flour, sugar, chocolate chips for the cookies she wanted to bake. The store was warm and crowded, people buying supplies and chatting, Christmas music playing on a radio somewhere. I was waiting in line to pay when someone behind me said, "Excuse me, I think you dropped this." I turned and found myself looking at a man about my age, maybe a bit older, holding out the scarf I'd been carrying. He was tall, with dark hair and kind gray eyes, wearing a thick flannel coat over jeans and work boots. "Oh," I said, taking the scarf. "Thank you. I didn't realize." "No problem," he said, smiling. Then his expression shifted slightly. Curious. "You're new in town. I'd remember seeing you before." "I'm visiting my aunt," I explained. "Margaret Bennett. I'm staying with her for the holidays." "Margaret?" His face lit up. "She's wonderful. I've done some carpentry work for her. Fixed her porch railing last summer. Built her some new shelves. I'm Daniel, by the way. Daniel Hayes." "Clara," I said. "Clara Bennett." "Nice to meet you, Clara Bennett." He shifted the basket he was carrying. I noticed it was full of groceries. Simple bachelor fare. "How long are you staying?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "Through Christmas at least. Maybe longer." "Well, welcome to Pine Haven," Daniel said warmly. "It's a good place to be for the holidays. Best Christmas celebrations you'll ever see." The line moved forward, and I turned to pay for my things. When I was done and turned back around, Daniel was already at the register, but he looked up and gave me a small wave and another smile. I found myself smiling back. A real smile, the first one I'd managed in weeks. Walking back to Aunt Margaret's, I thought about Daniel Hayes. There had been something about him, a kindness in his eyes, a gentleness in the way he'd returned my scarf. Nothing dramatic, nothing earth-shattering. Just a small, warm moment on a cold winter day. That evening, as Aunt Margaret and I decorated the Christmas tree, I mentioned meeting him. "Oh, Daniel," Aunt Margaret said, carefully hanging a glass ornament. "Such a sweet young man. He's been living in Pine Haven for about 3 years now. Moved here from, I think it was New Hampshire. He's a carpenter. Does beautiful work. Everyone in town adores him." She glanced at me, something knowing in her expression. "He's single, you know. Lost his wife a few years back, poor thing. Cancer. He came here to start over, I think. To find peace." My heart squeezed with unexpected recognition. Someone else who understood loss. Someone else who'd come to these mountains to heal. "That's sad," I said quietly. "It is," Aunt Margaret agreed. "But he's doing better now. You can see it in him. The grief is still there, but so is the living. That's what time does, Clara. It doesn't erase the pain, but it teaches you how to carry it and keep going anyway." I thought about that as I hung another ornament on the tree, a delicate silver star. About carrying grief and still living. About healing without forgetting. About second chances. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft and steady, covering the world in silence and possibility. That night, I fell asleep to the sound of wind in the pines and the crackle of the dying fire downstairs. And for the first time since my mother died, I dreamed not of loss, but of something else. Something that felt almost like hope. In a small mountain town called Pine Haven, during the coldest time of year, something was beginning. I didn't know it yet. But Daniel Hayes and I were about to discover that sometimes Christmas miracles aren't about magic. They're about two broken people finding the courage to heal together. The morning after I met Daniel Hayes, I woke to find the world transformed. Snow had fallen heavily during the night, and everything outside was covered in at least a foot of pristine white powder. The sun was just rising, painting the snow pink and gold, and the silence was so complete, it felt like the world was holding its breath. I lay in bed for a while, warm under Aunt Margaret's quilts, watching the light change as the sun climbed higher. For the first time in months, I felt something close to contentment. Not happiness exactly, that still felt too far away, but a quiet peace that settled over me like the snow outside. Downstairs, Aunt Margaret was already up, the smell of coffee and bacon drifting through the house. I dressed in warm layers, thick socks, flannel-lined jeans, soft sweater, and went down to find her humming Christmas carols while she cooked. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she said cheerfully. "I was about to come wake you. We've got the Christmas market today in town, remember? Starts at 10. I'd forgotten about the market, but the prospect of it sounded pleasant. Something to do, somewhere to go, people to see. Better than sitting alone with my thoughts. We drove into town after breakfast, Aunt Margaret's old truck handling the snowy roads with ease. The town square had been transformed overnight. White tents set up in rows, vendors already arranging their wares. People beginning to gather despite the cold. "Everyone comes to this," Aunt Margaret explained as we parked. "It's tradition. Some of these vendors have been coming for 30 years or more. And the baked goods? Oh, Clara, wait until you taste Martha Henderson's gingerbread. It's legendary." We spent the morning wandering from tent to tent. There were hand-knitted scarves and mittens, carved wooden toys, homemade jams and preserves, candles that smelled like pine and cinnamon, pottery, jewelry, quilts. Everyone seemed to know Aunt Margaret, and she introduced me to what felt like half the town. "This is my niece Clara," she'd say. "She's staying with me for the holidays." And everyone would smile warmly and say things like, "Welcome to Pine Haven," and "We're so glad to have you," and "You picked a beautiful time to visit." Their kindness was genuine, unhurried, the kind of small-town warmth I'd forgotten existed. I was examining some beautiful hand-dipped candles when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Those are nice. Sarah makes them herself. The pine one smells exactly like the forest after a snow." I turned to find Daniel Hayes, bundled in a heavy coat and scarf, holding a steaming cup of what looked like hot cider. He smiled when he saw my expression. "We keep running into each other," he said. "Must be a small town." "Must be," I agreed, smiling back despite myself. "Are you enjoying the market?" he asked. "I am," I said honestly. "It's lovely. Everyone's so friendly." "That's Pine Haven for you," Daniel said. "Especially at Christmas. It brings out the best in people here." He paused, then asked, "Have you tried the cider yet? Mr. Peterson makes it. It's incredible. Let me buy you a cup." I started to protest, but he was already heading toward a tent where an elderly man was serving steaming cups from a large pot. Daniel returned a moment later and handed me a cup. "Thank you," I said, wrapping my cold hands around it. The warmth felt wonderful. You're welcome. Daniel gestured toward the edge of the square where there were some benches. Want to sit for a minute? I've been on my feet since 6 this morning and could use a rest. We sat on a bench with a view of the whole market, watching people browse and chat, children running between the tents, snow beginning to fall again in soft, lazy flakes. So, Daniel said after a moment of comfortable silence, "What brings you to Pine Haven for Christmas? Just visiting your aunt? Or are you running away from something?" The question was direct, but asked gently, without judgment. I found myself answering honestly. "A bit of both, I suppose," I said. "This has been a difficult year. My mother passed away. My engagement ended. I lost my job. By December, I felt like I was drowning. Aunt Margaret invited me here, and I realized I needed to say yes. Needed to get away from everything that reminded me of all I'd lost." Daniel nodded slowly, his gray eyes understanding. "I'm sorry about your mother," he said, "and the rest of it. That's a lot to deal with." "Thank you." I took a sip of the cider. He was right. It was delicious, sweet and spiced and warming. "Aunt Margaret mentioned you'd had a difficult time, too, that you lost your wife." "I did," Daniel said quietly. 3 years ago now. Sarah. We'd been married 5 years when she got sick. Cancer. It took her in less than a year." He stared out at the market, his expression distant. "Afterward, I couldn't stay where we'd lived. Everything reminded me of her. So I came here, to the mountains, found a small cabin outside town, started doing carpentry work, tried to build a new life." "Has it helped?" I asked. "Being here?" "Yes," Daniel said simply. "Not right away. The first year was hell, honestly, but slowly, gradually, the peace here started to seep in. The mountains, the quiet, the community. People here understand that grief takes time. They don't rush you or tell you to move on. They just let you be. And eventually, I found I could breathe again, could smile again, could imagine a future again." We sat in silence for a while, watching the snow fall, sipping our cider. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the silence of two people who understood loss, who didn't need to fill every moment with words. "Can I show you something?" Daniel asked eventually. "Sure," I said. We walked through town, past the market, down a side street to a small workshop with a sign that read, "Hayes Woodworking." Daniel unlocked the door and led me inside. The workshop was beautiful, organized chaos, with tools hung neatly on walls, lumber stacked in corners, a workbench covered in wood shavings and works in progress. The whole place smelled like sawdust and wood oil, warm and pleasant. "This is where I work," Daniel said, looking around with quiet pride. "It's not much, but it's mine." He showed me some of his finished pieces: a rocking chair with elegant curves, a dining table with intricate inlay work, a set of shelves carved with delicate leaf patterns. Everything was beautiful, crafted with obvious skill and care. "Daniel, these are incredible," I said, running my hand over the smooth surface of the table. "You're really talented." "Thank you," he said, clearly pleased. I learned from my grandfather. He was a furniture maker, taught me everything he knew. When I came here, I thought I'd just do odd jobs, repairs, that sort of thing. But people started asking for custom pieces, and it grew from there. He picked up a small wooden box from the workbench, still unfinished. I'm making Christmas gifts for some people in town. Mrs. Peterson wants a jewelry box for her daughter. The Hendersons want a toy chest for their grandson. It keeps me busy. Do you ever make things just for yourself? I asked. Daniel smiled. Sometimes, when inspiration strikes. He set the box down and looked at me. What about you? What did you do before? Before everything. I was a librarian, I said. In Boston. I loved it. The quiet, the books, helping people find what they needed. When they cut my position, I felt lost. Like I'd lost my purpose along with everything else. Librarian suits you, Daniel said thoughtfully. You have that calm, thoughtful quality, like you notice things other people miss. I felt myself blush slightly, unexpectedly pleased by the observation. Thank you. We talked for another hour in that workshop, surrounded by the smell of wood and the soft sound of snow against the windows. Daniel told me about Pine Haven, about his favorite places in the mountains, about the community that had helped him heal. I told him about Boston, about my mother, about the library I'd loved. It was easy talking to him. He listened carefully, asked questions, shared his own experiences without making it about him. And there was something comforting about being with someone who understood loss, who didn't expect me to be over it or doing better on any particular timeline. When we finally left the workshop, the afternoon was fading into evening. The market was winding down, vendors packing up, the Christmas lights in town beginning to glow brighter as darkness fell. Would you like to have dinner? Daniel asked as we walked back toward the square. There's a diner here. Nothing fancy, but the food is good and it's warm. When I told her Daniel had invited me to dinner, her face lit up. What a lovely idea, she said. You go ahead, Clara. I have more than enough to keep me busy at home. Have fun, both of you. The diner was warm and cozy, with red vinyl booths and a long counter. Christmas decorations everywhere, and the smell of coffee and pie. We slid into a booth, and a waitress brought menus and water. Everything's good here, Daniel said, but the meatloaf is legendary. And save room for pie. Betty makes the best apple pie you'll ever taste. We ordered, and while we waited for food, we talked more. Daniel told me about learning carpentry from his grandfather, about how working with wood felt meditative, how seeing something beautiful emerge from raw materials gave him hope during dark times. I told him about discovering books as a child, about how the library had been my refuge growing up, about the joy of connecting readers with stories that might change their lives. You miss it, Daniel observed. The library walk. I do, I admitted, more than I expected to. It felt like I was doing something meaningful. You know, something that mattered. You'll find that again, Daniel said with quiet certainty. Maybe not in exactly the same way, but you'll find your purpose. I believe that. We don't lose our callings just because circumstances change. They adapt, evolve, find new forms. The food arrived. He was right about the meatloaf. And we ate and talked and laughed. Daniel had a dry sense of humor that caught me off guard, making me laugh when I least expected it. And he was genuinely interested in everything I said, asking follow-up questions, making connections, seeing things I didn't see about myself. By the time we finished, and yes, we both had pie, and yes, it was incredible, I realized hours had passed, and I felt lighter than I had in months. Not healed, not fixed, but lighter. Like maybe grief didn't have to be quite so heavy all the time. Daniel walked me back to where Aunt Margaret's truck was parked. The snow had stopped, and the night was clear and cold. Stars brilliant overhead. The Christmas lights of Pine Haven glowing warm against the darkness. Thank you for today, I said, for the cider and the workshop tour and dinner. It was really nice. It was, Daniel agreed. Can I see you again? Maybe show you some of my favorite places around here? There's a trail that leads to a waterfall that's absolutely beautiful in winter. I'd like that, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. How about tomorrow afternoon? I could pick you up around 2? That sounds perfect. We stood there for a moment, neither of us quite ready to say goodbye. Finally, Daniel smiled. Sleep well, Clara. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night, Daniel. I watched him walk away down the snowy street, hands in his pockets, his breath visible in the cold air. Then I climbed into the truck and drove back to Aunt Margaret's, my mind full of the day, of conversations and laughter, and the unexpected pleasure of connection. Aunt Margaret was reading by the fire when I got home. She looked up with a knowing smile as I came in. Good evening, she asked innocently. Very good, I admitted, hanging up my coat. He's nice, easy to talk to. He is that, Aunt Margaret agreed. And he clearly enjoyed your company. I haven't seen him smile like that in a long time. I thought about that as I got ready for bed, about how Daniel had smiled, how his eyes had lit up when he talked about his work, how he'd listened to me like what I said mattered. And I thought about how for a few hours today, I hadn't felt like a person drowning in grief. I'd felt like myself again, like Clara, not just the woman whose mother died, or the woman whose fiancé left her. That night, I fell asleep quickly, lulled by the warmth of the house and the memory of laughter in a cozy diner. And I dreamed not of loss, but of wood shavings and starlight and kind gray eyes. Something was beginning there in that small mountain town. Something gentle and unexpected. Two people who'd both known deep loss, finding in each other not a cure for grief, but a companion for the journey through it. Tomorrow would bring new discoveries, new moments, new reasons to believe that healing was possible. But for now, Clara slept peacefully, wrapped in quilts and possibility. Daniel arrived promptly at 2 o'clock the next afternoon, driving a rugged blue pickup truck that looked like it had seen many winters. I was ready, bundled in layers, with boots and mittens, and my mother's scarf wrapped around my neck. Aunt Margaret waved us off from the porch, that knowing smile still playing at her lips. Have fun, you too. Be back before dark. The drive took us deeper into the mountains, up winding roads that climbed higher with each turn. Daniel drove confidently, clearly knowing these roads well, occasionally pointing out landmarks. A particular tree struck by lightning years ago, a bend in the road where deer often crossed, a clearing where he'd once seen a black bear in summer. The waterfall is about a mile hike from where we park, he explained. Not too strenuous, but let me know if you need to slow down. Take breaks if you need them. I'll be fine, I assured him. I've been walking a lot since I got here. The exercise feels good. We parked in a small lot where the plowed road ended, then set out on a trail that led into the forest. The world under the trees was hushed and magical. Sunlight filtering through the branches, snow covering everything in a thick white blanket. Our boots crunched with each step, our breath visible in the cold air. Daniel walked beside me, matching my pace, pointing out things along the way. See those tracks? Rabbit. And those bigger ones are deer. This forest is full of life, even in winter. It's beautiful, I said, looking around at the snow-laden pines, the icicles hanging from branches, the way the light played through the trees. Peaceful. It is, Daniel agreed. This is where I come when I need to think, when the grief gets heavy, or when I need to remember why life is worth living. Nature doesn't judge, it just exists, cycles through seasons, keeps going. There's something comforting about that. We walked in companionable silence for a while. The only sounds are footsteps and the occasional call of a bird. I found myself relaxing into the rhythm of it, the simple pleasure of walking through beauty, of being present in the moment, rather than trapped in memories of the past or worries about the future. After about 45 minutes, I began to hear it. The sound of rushing water, muffled by snow and distance, but unmistakable. Daniel smiled when he saw my expression. Almost there, he said. We rounded a bend, and suddenly the trees opened up to reveal the waterfall. It was spectacular, a cascade of water falling maybe 30 feet, partially frozen into fantastical ice formations, still flowing in the center where the current was too strong to freeze. The pool at the bottom was ringed with ice, and icicles hung like crystal chandeliers from the rocks surrounding it. Daniel, I breathed, this is incredible. "I thought you might like it," he said, clearly pleased by my reaction. "It's different in every season, but I think winter might be my favorite. The ice makes it look like something from a fairy tale." We stood there for a long time, just watching the waterfall, listening to its constant music. There was something hypnotic about it, something that quieted the constant chatter in my mind. "Can I tell you something?" Daniel said eventually, his voice quiet. "Of course. When Sarah died, I didn't think I'd ever feel anything again except grief," he said, still looking at the waterfall. "I thought that was it for me, that I'd had my happiness, and now I'd just exist until I didn't anymore. Coming to places like this helped. Nature reminded me that life continues, that beauty persists, even in the coldest, darkest times." He turned to look at me. "But I've been realizing something this past year, maybe 2 years actually, that I don't want to just exist anymore. I want to live again. Really live." I was starting to feel ready for that, starting to open up to the possibility. And then you showed up in the general store. He trailed off, looking uncertain for the first time since I'd met him. "And?" I prompted gently. "And I felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years," Daniel said. "Interest, curiosity, hope. When I saw you, when we talked, I wanted to know more. I wanted to see you again. And that scared me, honestly. Made me feel guilty, like I was betraying Sarah's memory." I understood that completely. I felt guilty too, I admitted, about enjoying yesterday, about looking forward to today. Like I should still be drowning in grief, like happiness is somehow disrespectful to my mother's memory, or like I'm betraying Robert, even though he's the one who left. "But your mother wouldn't want you to drown," Daniel said firmly. "I didn't know her, but I'm certain of that. She'd want you to live, to find joy again, to build a future. Just like Sarah would want that for me." "I know you're right," I said. "Intellectually, I know that. But emotions don't always listen to logic." "No," Daniel agreed. "They don't." We stood there in silence again. And then Daniel did something unexpected. He reached out and took my hand, his gloved fingers lacing through mine. "I don't know what this is," he said, "between us. Maybe it's just two lonely people finding comfort each other during the holidays. Maybe it's something more. But I'd like to find out, if you would. No pressure, no expectations, just seeing where it goes." I looked at our joined hands, then up at his face. His gray eyes were honest, vulnerable, hopeful, and I realized I wanted that too. Wanted to explore this unexpected connection, this gentle possibility. "I'd like that," I said. Daniel smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Good." We started back down the trail, still holding hands, talking more easily now that we'd acknowledged what was happening between us. Daniel told me about his wife, about their life together, about how she'd made him laugh and challenged him and loved him unconditionally. It didn't hurt to hear about her. It felt right, like honoring what had been while making space for what might be. I told him about my mother, about how strong she'd been during her illness, about her last days when I'd held her hand and told her it was okay to let go, about how lost I'd felt afterward, how every day had been a struggle to find a reason to get out of bed. "And Robert?" Daniel asked. "Do you want to talk about him?" "There's not much to say, really," I admitted. "We met at the library. He was nice, stable, checked all the boxes. When he proposed, I said yes, because it seemed like the right next step. But I don't think I was ever in love with him. Not really. And when my mother got sick and I needed support, he couldn't handle it. He wanted someone easy, uncomplicated. I was complicated. Complicated isn't bad," Daniel said. "Complicated means you've lived, experienced things, have depth. Anyone who can't handle that doesn't deserve you." We arrived back at the truck as the afternoon light was beginning to fade. Daniel suggested we stop at the diner again for hot chocolate before heading back, and I agreed immediately. The diner was quieter than it had been the night before. Just a few locals nursing coffee and pie. We slid into the same booth, and Betty came over with a knowing smile. "You two again," she said. "Good to see. Hot chocolate?" "Please," we both said at once, then laughed. When she brought the hot chocolate, rich and creamy with marshmallows melting on top, Daniel raised his mug. "To new friends," he said, "and unexpected possibilities." "To new friends," I echoed, clinking my mug against his. We talked about lighter things then. Books we loved, movies we'd seen, childhood memories of Christmas. I learned that Daniel had grown up in New Hampshire, that he had a sister who lived in Maine, that he'd wanted to be an architect before discovering he preferred working with his hands to drawing plans. He learned that I'd grown up mostly in Massachusetts, and I was an only child, that I'd spent childhood summers at Aunt Margaret's and had always loved the mountains, that I'd read Little Women at least 20 times, that I preferred tea to coffee, that I could play piano but hadn't touched one in years. "There's a piano at the community center," Daniel mentioned. "They keep it in tune for events, and anyone who wants to practice, you could play there if you wanted." The thought of playing again, of feeling those keys under my fingers, of making music, sent a little thrill through me. "I might like that," I said. "I'd like to hear you play," Daniel said. "Sometime, if you're comfortable with it." "Maybe," I said, smiling. "We'll see." By the time we left the diner, it was dark, and the temperature had dropped sharply. The drive back to Aunt Margaret's was quiet, both of us content with the day, with each other's company. When we pulled up to the house, Daniel turned off the engine, but didn't get out immediately. "Can I see you tomorrow?" he asked. "There's caroling in town tomorrow night. The whole community does it, walking house to house. It's cold, but fun. And there's hot cider and cookies afterward at the church. Would you like to come?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I'd love that." "Great. I'll pick you up around 6. "Perfect." We sat there for a moment longer, neither of us quite ready to say goodbye. Finally, Daniel reached over and squeezed my hand. "Thank you for today, Clara. for sharing that time with me, for being honest about everything. Thank you for showing me the waterfall, I said, and for understanding. About grief, about all of it. We understand each other, Daniel said simply. That's rare, worth holding on to. I went inside to find Aunt Margaret knitting by the fire, a smile already playing at her lips before I even said anything. Good day? She asked innocently. Very good, I admitted, hanging up my coat and unwrapping my mother's scarf. I touched it gently, thinking about how she would have liked Daniel, how she would have been happy that I was starting to heal. He's a good man, Aunt Margaret said, not looking up from her knitting. And you're good for each other, I think. Two people who understand what it means to lose everything and keep going anyway. It's too soon, I said, but without conviction. I just got here. I barely know him. Time is funny that way, Aunt Margaret said wisely. Sometimes you can know someone for years and never really know them. Sometimes you can meet someone and feel like you've known them forever. The heart doesn't work on a schedule, Clara. It works on its own time. I thought about that as I got ready for bed, about hearts and schedules and the unexpected ways life unfolds. A week ago, I'd been in Boston, hollow and grieving, unable to imagine feeling anything but pain. Now I was in a small mountain town, looking forward to tomorrow, feeling something that might be hope stirring in my chest. The next evening, Daniel arrived at 6 as promised, and we drove into town together. The caroling group was gathering in the square, maybe 50 people of all ages, bundled in coats and scarves, holding song sheets, laughing and talking. Daniel introduced me to people. The Hendersons and their grandson, the Petersons, Martha, who made the legendary gingerbread, families and couples and elderly folks and teenagers. Everyone welcomed me warmly, made me feel like I belonged. We set off through town as darkness fell, stopping at each house to sing carols. Some people came out to listen. Some sang from their porches. Some invited us in for a moment to warm up. It was magical. The snow falling softly, the sound of voices lifted in song, the Christmas lights glowing, the sense of community and connection. Daniel stood next to me the whole time, our shoulders touching, occasionally singing harmony to my melody. He had a nice voice, rich and steady, and singing with him felt natural, easy. At one house, an elderly woman came to the door in a wheelchair, tears streaming down her face as we sang Silent Night. When we finished, she thanked us, her voice breaking. My husband and I used to do this together, she said. Every year for 50 years. He passed in September. This is my first Christmas without him. Hearing you all sing, it helps. It reminds me I'm not alone. Several people hugged her, promised to visit, made sure she had everything she needed. And I watched Daniel, saw the compassion in his face, the way he understood her grief intimately. After caroling, we gathered at the church for hot cider and cookies. Daniel and I found a quiet corner and sat with our cider, watching the community mingle and laugh. That woman, I said, the widow, that was hard to see. It was, Daniel agreed, but also beautiful in a way. She's hurting, But she's not alone. The community will take care of her, check on her, make sure she gets through this first Christmas. That's what people do here. They show up for each other. I like that, I said. That sense of everyone looking out for everyone. Me too, Daniel said. It's one of the reasons I stayed. In the city, you can be anonymous, isolated. Here, people notice if you're struggling. They bring you casseroles and firewood and company. They don't let you disappear into grief. We stayed until late, talking with people, singing a few more carols, soaking in the warmth and fellowship. When Daniel finally drove me home, I felt full of connection, of music, of community, of something that felt almost like joy. Tomorrow's Sunday, Daniel said as we pulled up to Aunt Margaret's. Want to come to church with me in the morning? Then maybe we could drive up to see the Christmas lights display they set up on Ridge Road. It's supposed to be spectacular this year. Both sound perfect, I said. We said goodnight, and I went inside, humming one of the carols we'd sung. Aunt Margaret had already gone to bed, but she'd left the fire burning and a plate of cookies on the counter with a note. For late night snacking, glad you had fun. Love you. I sat by the fire for a while, eating cookies, thinking about the evening, about the caroling and the widow and Daniel's steady presence beside me, about how just a week ago I couldn't have imagined feeling this way, open, hopeful, alive. The grief was still there. I still missed my mother terribly. But alongside the grief, room was being made for something else, for new experiences, new connections, new possibilities. Maybe, I thought, that was what healing looked like. Not forgetting or moving on, but making room for life alongside loss. Carrying both, allowing both, honoring both. The days were passing quickly now, each one bringing new moments with Daniel, new reasons to smile, new evidence that maybe, just maybe, it was okay to let happiness back into my heart. Christmas was approaching, and with it, decisions that would need to be made. But for now, Clara was content to take each day as it came, to let this gentle connection with Daniel unfold naturally, to trust that whatever was meant to happen would happen in its own time. Sunday morning dawned clear and bright. The kind of winter day where the sunlight on snow is almost blinding. I dressed carefully for church. A simple navy dress, worn tights, my mother's scarf draped over my shoulders. Aunt Margaret and I had breakfast together, and then Daniel arrived at 9:30 to pick us both up. The church was a beautiful white building with a tall steeple, probably built in the 1800s, lovingly maintained over the decades. Inside, it was warm and welcoming, with old wooden pews and stained glass windows that cast colored light across the congregation. Pine garland draped the altar, and a large Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with handmade ornaments. Daniel led us to a pew about halfway up, and we settled in as the church filled around us. I recognized many faces from the caroling. The widow from last night received hugs from several people as she was wheeled in. The Hendersons sat with their grandson. Martha and her husband took their usual spot near the front. The service was simple and lovely. The minister, a kind-faced man in his 60s, spoke about hope in dark times, about light returning even in the longest nights. The choir sang, O come, Emmanuel," and the first Noel, their voices filling the old church with beauty. During the hymns, Daniel shared his hymnal with me, and I was conscious of his shoulder against mine, his voice blending with mine as we sang. There was something deeply comforting about it. The ritual, the community, the sense of being part of something larger than my own grief. After the service, everyone gathered in the church hall for coffee and pastries. Daniel introduced me to the minister, Pastor Wilson, who shook my hand warmly. "Welcome to Pine Haven," he said. "Margaret's told me about you. I'm glad you're spending Christmas here. It's a good place to be during the holidays." "It is," I agreed. "Everyone has been so welcoming." "That's the Pine Haven way," Pastor Wilson said with a smile. "We take care of our own. And our visitors." He looked between Daniel and me with knowing eyes. "I hope we'll see more of you, Clara." After coffee, Daniel drove Aunt Margaret home. Then we headed up Ridge Road to see the Christmas lights display. The drive took us higher into the mountains, winding through forests dusted with fresh snow. A few families up here started putting up elaborate light displays about 10 years ago, Daniel explained. Then it became a friendly competition. Now the whole road is lit up. It's become a tradition. People drive from hours away to see it. As we climbed higher, I began to see what he meant. Houses appeared along the road, each one decorated with thousands of lights. Animated displays of reindeer and snowmen, nativity scenes, Santa's workshop, candy canes and stars and angels. Some had synchronized the lights to music, broadcasting on a local radio station. We drove slowly, taking it all in, occasionally stopping to get a better look at particularly impressive displays. One house had an entire miniature village set up in the front yard, complete with a working train that circled through the scene. Another had lights strung through every tree in their forest, creating a magical glowing woodland. "This is incredible," I said, watching the lights dance and sparkle. "I've never seen anything like it." "It's special," Daniel agreed. "When Sarah and I first moved here, we came up here our first Christmas. She loved it, said it looked like something from a storybook." His voice was soft with memory, but not painful. "Now I come every year. It reminds me of her, but in a good way." We reached the end of the lit section, and Daniel pulled over into a small lookout. From here, we could see back down the valley, the town of Pine Haven below, small and twinkling, the mountains rising on all sides, the late afternoon sun painting everything gold and pink. "I want to tell you something," Daniel said, turning to face me. "About Sarah and me. About us." "Okay," I said, giving him my full attention. When Sarah died, I made her a promise, Daniel began. I was holding her hand, and she could barely speak. But she made me promise something. She made me promise that I wouldn't stop living, that I would grieve her, yes, but that eventually I would let myself be happy again, that I would find love again if I could. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. At the time, I couldn't imagine it. Couldn't imagine wanting anyone else, loving anyone else. But I promised her, because it was what she wanted, and I'd have promised her anything in that moment. He took a shaky breath. For 3 years, I kept half that promise. I didn't stop living. I moved here, built my business, made friends, became part of the community. But the other half, the part about letting myself be happy, about finding love again, I couldn't do it. Didn't want to. It felt impossible. Daniel reached over and took my hand. And then you walked into the January store. And for the first time since Sarah died, I felt something. Not just interest or curiosity, but actual feelings, hope, excitement, the possibility of happiness. Daniel, I started, but he gently squeezed my hand. Let me finish, he said. I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a little over a week, but I also know what I feel, and I'd be lying if I said it was just friendship. I'm falling for you, Clara. Maybe I've already fallen, and I needed you to know that before we go any further. If you don't feel the same way, if you're not ready, if this is too much too soon, I'll understand. We can just be friends. But I had to be honest. I sat there, his hand warm in mine, looking at his face, earnest and vulnerable and hopeful. And I realized that I'd been falling too. Had been falling since that first conversation in the general store, through every walk and meal and shared moment. I'm falling too, I said quietly. It terrifies me. A week ago, I couldn't imagine ever feeling anything but grief. And I still miss my mother every day. But being with you, it doesn't make the grief go away, but it makes it bearable. It makes me feel like maybe I can have both. The sadness and the joy. The loss and the new beginning. You can, Daniel said firmly. We both can. We can honor what we've lost while embracing what we found. I'm scared, I admitted. What if it's too soon? What if we're just two broken people clinging to each other? Maybe we are, Daniel said. But maybe that's okay. Maybe two broken people can help each other heal. Maybe understanding each other's pain makes us better able to hold each other's happiness. He cupped my face in his hand, his thumb gently brushing my cheek. I'm not asking you to make any big decisions. I'm just asking if we can keep doing this. Spending time together, getting to know each other, seeing where it goes. No pressure, no rush, just being together. Yes, I said. I want that. Daniel smiled, that wonderful, transformative smile, and then he kissed me. Gently, sweetly, like I was something precious. And I kissed him back, tasting hope and possibility and the promise of healing. When we pulled apart, We were both smiling, a little teary, a lot happy. "It's going to snow," Daniel said, looking at the sky. "Big storm coming in tonight. Want to get dinner in town before it hits?" "That sounds perfect." We drove back down the mountain as the first flakes began to fall. By the time we reached the diner, the snow was coming down steadily, thick and fast. We rushed inside, laughing, shaking snow from our hair and coats. The diner was busy with people seeking comfort food before the storm. Betty seated us at our usual booth. When had it become our usual booth? And brought coffee without asking. "Storm's gonna be a big one," she said. "You two be careful driving home." We ordered comfort food, pot roast and mashed potatoes, warm and filling, and talked about everything and nothing, about childhoods and dreams, embarrassing moments and favorite memories, books and movies and music. We discovered we both loved old films, that we both wanted to travel, but never had, that we could both quote entire scenes from The Princess Bride. "Inconceivable!" Daniel said in a terrible accent, and I laughed so hard I snorted, which made both of us laugh even harder. The snow continued to fall outside, already accumulating on the streets, and the diner began to empty as people hurried home. Finally, Betty came over and said gently, "You two better head out. Roads are getting bad." Daniel paid the bill despite my protests, and we bundled up and headed out into the storm. The world had transformed. Snow falling so thick you could barely see 10 feet ahead. Everything white and hushed and magical. "I need to get you home safe," Daniel said. But there was worry in his voice. The roads would be treacherous. We drove slowly, carefully, Daniel's truck handling the snow well, but progress was slow. It took 3 times as long as usual to reach Aunt Margaret's, and by the time we arrived, the snow was nearly a foot deep and still falling. Aunt Margaret came to the door as we pulled up, relief on her face. "Thank goodness you're back. I was getting worried." "Daniel, you can't drive back to your cabin in this. Stay here tonight. The couch is comfortable, and I won't have you risking your life." "I don't want to impose," Daniel started, but Aunt Margaret cut him off. "Nonsense. It's decided. Come inside before you both freeze." We trudged through the snow to the house, stamping our feet on the porch. Inside was warm and bright, the fire crackling, the smell of soup filling the air. I made soup for dinner, assuming you'd need something warm when you got back. Aunt Margaret said, "Sit by the fire and warm up. I'll get you both bowls." We sat on the couch, shoulders touching, watching the fire, listening to the wind howl outside. It was cozy and peaceful, and I felt deeply content, safe inside while the storm raged. Daniel beside me, Aunt Margaret bustling in the kitchen. After soup and fresh bread, Aunt Margaret declared she was heading to bed. "It's been a long day, and these old bones need rest. You two stay up as long as you like. Clara, show Daniel where the linens are for the couch." When she'd gone upstairs, Daniel and I sat by the fire, talking quietly. We talked about the day, about the kiss, about what came next. "I don't know how long I can stay in Pine Haven," I said eventually. "I'll need to find work eventually, figure out my life. I can't live with Aunt Margaret forever." "What if you stayed?" Daniel asked. "Not forever with your aunt necessarily, but in Pine Haven." There's a small library in town. I could introduce you to Mrs. Henderson, who runs it. She's been talking about retiring soon, looking for someone to take over. And there are cabins for rent, small places that might suit you. You want me to stay? I asked, my heart beating faster. Yes, Daniel said simply. I know it's selfish. I know you have a life in Boston. But yes, I want you to stay. I want to see where this goes between us. I want more days like today, more conversations and kisses and shared moments. I want to introduce you to everyone as my girlfriend, not just Margaret's niece. I kissed him, cutting off his words. When we broke apart, I was smiling. I'll think about it, I said. Seriously think about it. Because I want those things too. More than I ever thought I'd want anything again. We stayed up late, talking and kissing by the fire, the storm raging outside, while we created our own warmth inside. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with us, and we said goodnight. I went upstairs to my room and stood at the window, watching the snow fall. The world outside was completely white, transformed, made new. And I felt like I was being made new too. Not forgetting what I'd lost, but creating space for what I might gain. The next morning, I woke to silence. The storm had passed in the night, and the world outside was buried under more than 2 feet of snow. The sun was shining, making the snow sparkle like diamonds, and the sky was that perfect clear blue you only get after a big storm. I went downstairs to find Daniel and Aunt Margaret already up, drinking coffee and looking out at the transformed landscape. Good morning, sleepyhead, Aunt Margaret said cheerfully. Coffee's ready, and I think we're going to need to dig out before Daniel can go anywhere. We spent the morning shoveling, the 3 of us working together to clear the driveway and paths. It was hard work, but good work, and there was something satisfying about it. Daniel was strong and efficient, making quick progress. But he'd stop frequently to check on me, to make sure I wasn't overdoing it. By noon, we'd finished, and Aunt Margaret insisted we come in for lunch. Grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. Simple and perfect. I should check on my place, Daniel said after lunch. Make sure my workshop is okay, that the pipes didn't freeze. But I'll call you later. Please do, I said. He kissed me goodbye. A real kiss. Not hiding anything from Aunt Margaret, who smiled knowingly. And then he was gone, his truck making fresh cracks in the newly plowed road. Aunt Margaret and I cleaned up from lunch, and then she sat me down at the kitchen table with a serious expression. Clara, she said gently, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Are you falling in love with Daniel Hayes? I thought about lying, about saying it was too soon to know, but Aunt Margaret deserved honesty. Yes, I said. I think I am. Maybe I already have. Aunt Margaret nodded, unsurprised. Good. He's a wonderful man, and you deserve wonderful. But sweetheart, what about Boston? What about your life there? I don't have much of a life there anymore, I admitted. No job, no relationship, no family except you. My apartment is just a place I sleep. There's nothing really holding me there. And here, Aunt Margaret asked, what's here? You, Daniel, this town. I said, "this town that's been so kind to me. The peace I've found in these mountains." I paused. "Aunt Margaret, would it be crazy if I stayed? If I tried to make a life here?" "Crazy?" Aunt Margaret laughed. "Honey, it would be the sanest thing you've done in a year. You're happy here. I can see it in you. The light coming back into your eyes. The smile that comes more easily. Why would you leave that?" "It's so fast," I said. "I've only known Daniel 2 weeks." "Time is relative," Aunt Margaret said wisely. "What matters is how you feel. Do you feel safe with him? Do you feel like yourself? Do you feel like you can heal with him beside you?" "Yes," I said, "to all of that." "And maybe it's not too fast at all," Aunt Margaret said. "Maybe it's exactly right." That afternoon, I called the landlord of my Boston apartment and gave notice. I called the few friends I had there and told them I was staying in Vermont. I called the post office to forward my mail. One by one, I cut the ties that bound me to a life that no longer fit. And with each call, each decision, I felt lighter, freer, more certain that this was right. When Daniel called that evening, I told him what I'd done. There was a long pause, and then his voice came through, thick with emotion. "You're staying?" "I'm staying," I confirmed. "At least for now. To see where this goes. To see if I can build a life here." "Clara," Daniel said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "That's the best Christmas present I could have asked for." The days between that snowy Sunday and Christmas Eve passed in a blur of joy and preparation. I felt like I was living in a dream, the kind of dream where everything is warm and bright and full of possibility. Daniel and I spent every day together. He took me to meet Mrs. Henderson at the library, a kind woman in her 70s who was indeed looking to retire. The library was small but charming, housed in a converted schoolhouse with wooden floors and tall windows and shelves packed with well-loved books. "I've been running this place for 30 years, Mrs. Henderson said, showing me around. "But my arthritis is getting bad, and my daughter wants me to move closer to her in New Hampshire. I've been dreading closing the library, but if you're interested in taking it over..." "I'm very interested," I said immediately, running my hand along the spines of books on the nearest shelf. The library smelled like old paper and wood polish and possibility. We talked details, salary, which was modest but enough to live on, hours, responsibilities. The town council would need to approve me officially, but Mrs. Henderson assured me that was just a formality. "You're Margaret's niece, and you were a librarian in Boston," she said. "That's good enough for everyone here. Besides, Daniel speaks very highly of you, and everyone trusts Daniel's judgment." I left the library feeling lighter than air. A job, a purpose, a reason to stay beyond just Daniel. It felt like pieces clicking into place, like a life taking shape. Daniel also helped me look at rentals. There were a few small cabins available. One in particular caught my eye. It was tiny, just 1 bedroom and a small living space, but it had a stone fireplace and large windows overlooking the forest. And it was only 10 minutes from both the library and Daniel's workshop. I could help you fix it up, Daniel offered as we walked through the space. Build you some better shelves, repair that loose floorboard, maybe add a reading nook by the window. You'd do that? I asked. Clara, I'd do anything for you, he said simply, and kissed me in the middle of the empty cabin, sunlight streaming through the windows. We fell into a comfortable routine. Mornings. I'd help Aunt Margaret with household tasks and baking. We made dozens of cookies for various Christmas events, the house constantly smelling of cinnamon and sugar. Afternoons, Daniel and I would meet, sometimes at his workshop, where he'd teach me about woodworking, sometimes for walks in the snowy forest, sometimes just at the diner for coffee and conversation. Evenings, we'd often have dinner with Aunt Margaret, the three of us becoming a little family unit. Daniel would bring firewood or help with repairs around the house. We'd play cards or read aloud or just talk by the fire. It was peaceful and domestic, and everything I hadn't known I wanted. One evening, about a week before Christmas, Daniel arrived at Aunt Margaret's with a large wrapped package. What's this? I asked. An early Christmas present, he said, looking slightly nervous. I made it for you. I hope you like it. I carefully unwrapped it to find the most beautiful wooden box. It was carved from cherry wood with an intricate design of snowflakes on the lid, perfectly crafted with obvious care and skill. Daniel, I breathed, this is gorgeous. Open it, he said. Inside, the box was lined with soft fabric, and there was something wrapped in tissue paper. I lifted it out and unwrapped it to find a smaller, carved piece, a delicate wooden bookmark with my initials carved into it, along with a tiny pine tree. For the librarian, Daniel said softly. I thought you could keep your special bookmarks in the box, and I added your initials because I wanted to make something that was specifically yours. I felt tears prick my eyes. No one had ever made me anything before. The thoughtfulness of it, the time and skill and love that had gone into it, it overwhelmed me. I love it, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Daniel, this is the most thoughtful gift anyone's ever given me. You deserve thoughtful gifts, he said, pulling me into his arms. You deserve everything good, Clara. The next evening, Daniel took me to the community center for the annual Christmas concert. The whole town was there. Families packed into the hall. Children fidgeting in their seats. The air buzzing with excitement. The concert was wonderful. The school choir sang carols. Mrs. Peterson played piano beautifully. There was even a small orchestra made up of local musicians. But the best part came at the end, when they invited anyone who wanted to come up and play or sing. You should play, Daniel whispered to me. I haven't played in years, I protested. All the more reason, he said. What's the worst that can happen? So I found myself walking up to the piano, nervous, but also excited. I sat down, tested the keys. It was well-tuned, responsive. And then I played. I played Silent Night, the notes coming back to my fingers like they'd never left, muscle memory taking over. The hall went quiet as I played, and when I finished, there was a moment of silence before applause erupted. I looked out at the audience and saw Daniel in the front row, beaming with pride, and Aunt Margaret beside him with tears in her eyes. I played 2 more songs, O Holy Night and The First Noel, and each time the audience listened with rapt attention. When I returned to my seat, Daniel took my hand and squeezed it. "You're incredible," he said. "That was beautiful." "Thank you for pushing me to do it," I said. I'd forgotten how much I love playing. After the concert, we walked through town, looking at the Christmas lights, holding hands, talking about everything and nothing. The night was cold but clear, stars brilliant overhead, our breath visible in the crisp air. "Clara," Daniel said eventually, "I want to ask you something." "Okay," I said, my heart speeding up. "Christmas Eve is in 3 days," he said. "There's the candlelight service at the church, which I'd love for you to come to with me. But I was also hoping, would you spend Christmas Day with me? At my cabin? I'd cook us dinner. We could exchange gifts. Just be together. If you want to, I mean. If you'd rather be with your aunt, I understand." "I'd love to," I said immediately. "Aunt Margaret is actually going to her friend's house for Christmas dinner. She invited me, but I think she'd be happy if I spent it with you instead." "Good," Daniel said, relief evident in his voice, "because I really want to share Christmas with you. Our first Christmas together. Hopefully the first of many," I said, and kissed him right there on Main Street, under the Christmas lights, not caring who saw. The next few days were a flurry of preparation. I helped Aunt Margaret finish her baking. I bought small gifts for the people who'd been kind to me. Betty at the diner, Mrs. Henderson at the library, the Petersons who'd invited me to coffee, and I agonized over what to get Daniel. Finally, I decided on 2 things. First, a beautiful leather tool belt I found in a specialty shop 2 towns over. Practical, but also made with obvious quality and care. And second, something more personal. I went to the bookshop in town and found a beautiful leather-bound journal. Empty pages waiting to be filled. Inside the front cover, I wrote, "For Daniel, may this hold your thoughts, your designs, your dreams. Thank you for helping me find mine again. Love, Clara." Christmas Eve arrived, clear and cold and magical. The candlelight service was at 7, and Daniel picked me up just before, looking handsome in a dark suit and tie. The church was packed, every pew full, people standing in the back. The lights were dim, and each person held a candle, the flames creating a warm glow throughout the space. We sang carols, listened to the Christmas story read by Pastor Wilson, and prayed together. At the end of the service, Pastor Wilson invited everyone to light their neighbor's candle, passing the light from person to person. Daniel lit my candle from his. our faces illuminated by the gentle glow, and I felt tears slip down my cheeks, not from sadness, but from the beauty of it all, from the sense of community and connection and hope. After the service, people lingered outside, hugging and wishing each other Merry Christmas. Daniel introduced me to more people. Somehow there were still people I hadn't met, and everyone was warm and welcoming. When we finally left, Daniel drove me back to Aunt Margaret's, but he walked me to the door slowly, clearly not ready to say goodnight. "Thank you for coming with me tonight," he said. "Having you there, sharing that with you, it meant everything." "Thank you for inviting me," I said. "It was beautiful." "I'll pick you up at noon tomorrow?" he asked. "For Christmas at my place?" "I'll be ready," I promised. He kissed me goodnight, a long, slow kiss that left me breathless. And then he was gone, his truck disappearing down the snowy road. Inside, Aunt Margaret was still up, sitting by the fire with hot cocoa. "Good service?" she asked. "Beautiful," I said, sitting beside her. "Aunt Margaret, I want to thank you for inviting me here, for giving me a place to heal, for supporting me and Daniel. This has been the best Christmas I could have imagined." "Oh, sweetheart," Aunt Margaret said, pulling me into a hug. "You don't need to thank me. Seeing you happy again, seeing you come back to life, that's all the thanks I need. Your mother would be so proud of you, Clara. So proud of how strong you've been, how you've allowed yourself to heal, how you've opened your heart again." We sat there for a while, drinking cocoa, watching the fire, comfortable in each other's presence. Eventually, Aunt Margaret patted my hand and stood. "I'm off to bed. Big day tomorrow. I need to be at the Hendersons early to help with dinner. You have a wonderful Christmas with Daniel, you hear? And don't rush home. Take your time. Enjoy the day." I stayed by the fire a bit longer after she went upstairs, thinking about the past few weeks, about how much my life had changed. A month ago, I'd been hollow and broken, unable to imagine feeling anything but grief. And now, here I was, falling in love, making plans, building a new life. My mother would have liked Daniel, I thought. She would have appreciated his kindness, his integrity, the way he made me laugh. And she would have been happy that I was choosing life again, choosing happiness. "Merry Christmas, Mama," I whispered to the fire. "I miss you, but I'm going to be okay, I promise." Christmas morning dawned bright and clear. I woke early, feeling like a child on Christmas, excited and nervous and full of anticipation. I dressed carefully, a soft green sweater and dark jeans, my hair down, the pearl earrings my mother had given me for my birthday years ago. Aunt Margaret and I had a quick breakfast together, and then she was off to the Hendersons, leaving me to wait for Daniel. He arrived exactly at noon, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing a smile that made my heart skip. "Merry Christmas," he said, kissing me on the porch. "Merry Christmas," I replied, grabbing the bag with his gifts and my coat. The drive to his cabin took us up into the mountains, winding along snow-packed roads. His place was tucked into the forest, a beautiful log cabin with a stone chimney and a wide porch, smoke already rising from the chimney. "You started the fire?" I asked as we climbed the porch steps. "Hours ago," Daniel admitted. "I wanted the place to be warm and cozy for you." Inside was exactly that, warm and cozy and welcoming. The cabin was small but beautifully appointed, with exposed log walls, comfortable furniture, a kitchen area in one corner, and a loft bedroom visible above. A Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with simple ornaments, and there was greenery draped over the mantel. "Daniel, this is wonderful," I said, looking around. "I cleaned," he said, looking slightly embarrassed. "Wanted it to look nice for you." He'd made dinner already, a roast chicken with vegetables, fresh bread, and an apple pie that was currently warming in the oven. We ate at his small table by the window, looking out at the snowy forest, talking and laughing and enjoying being together. After dinner, we moved to the couch by the fire, and Daniel handed me a wrapped package. "For you," he said. "Open it." Inside was the most beautiful hand-knitted scarf, soft wool in shades of blue and gray, clearly made with care and skill. "I didn't make it," Daniel admitted. "Mrs. Peterson knitted it. But I chose the colors. They reminded me of your eyes. And there's something else." He handed me another smaller box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a small charm, a tiny pine tree, exquisitely detailed. "To remember this Christmas," Daniel said softly. "The Christmas we found each other." I felt tears spill over as I lifted the necklace from the box. "Help me put it on?" He fastened it around my neck, his fingers gentle on my skin, and then turned me to face him. "I love you, Clara," he said, looking into my eyes. "I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few weeks, but I love you. I've loved you since you dropped your scarf in the general store, if I'm honest, and I needed to tell you, on our first Christmas together." "I love you too," I said, the words coming easily, feeling right. "I love you, Daniel Hayes. You've helped me heal, helped me find myself again, helped me believe in happiness." He kissed me then, deep and slow, and I kissed him back with everything I had. When we broke apart, we were both smiling through tears. "Your turn," I said, handing him his gifts. He opened the tool belt first, his face lighting up. "This is perfect. I've needed a new one for months. Thank you." Then he opened the journal, reading my inscription, and his eyes filled with tears. "Clara," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'll treasure this. I promise." We spent the rest of the day curled up together on the couch, talking about the future, making plans, dreaming out loud. We talked about me moving into the rental cabin in January, about starting at the library, about holidays and visits, and eventually, maybe, something more permanent. "I want to build you something," Daniel said eventually. "A house, our house. Not right away. We have time. But eventually, I want to design it together, build it with my own hands, create a home that's specifically ours." "I'd love that," I said, imagining it. A house we build together, a home we make. As evening fell, we bundled up and went outside. The night was clear and cold, stars brilliant overhead, and the snow on the ground reflected the moonlight, making everything glow silver. "Make a wish," Daniel said, looking up at the stars. "It's Christmas night. Wishes made tonight always come true." I closed my eyes and wished. I wished for more days like this, for health and happiness, for this love to last and grow, for a future with Daniel, whatever that looked like. When I opened my eyes, Daniel was watching me, smiling softly. "What did you wish for?" he asked. "I can't tell you," I said. "Then it won't come true." "Fair enough," he said, pulling me close. I made a wish too. I think our wishes probably look pretty similar. We stood there in the snow, under the stars, holding each other, grateful beyond words for this Christmas, this love, this second chance at happiness. That Christmas, Clara learned something precious, that healing doesn't mean forgetting, and loving again doesn't dishonor what was lost. It means honoring both the past and the future, carrying the memory of those we've lost, while opening our hearts to new possibilities. There was more ahead for Clara and Daniel. More seasons together, more challenges and joys, more building of a life and love. But this Christmas, this perfect Christmas, would always be the one they remembered, the one that changed everything. The years unfolded like a beautiful story, each chapter bringing new joys and challenges, new reasons to be grateful for that Christmas when everything changed. I moved into the small cabin in January of 1973, and Daniel was there every day, helping me settle in, building shelves and fixing things and making it feel like home. He carved a small wooden sign for the front door that read "Clara's Cabin" and hung it himself, grinning at my reaction. I started at the library in February, and it was like coming home to a part of myself I'd lost. The patrons were wonderful. Children coming for story time, elderly folks browsing for large print mysteries, teenagers looking for romance novels they tried to hide from their parents. I learned everyone's preferences, made recommendations, created displays for holidays and seasons. Mrs. Henderson stayed on for a month to train me, and by the time she moved to New Hampshire, I felt confident and happy in my role. The town council officially hired me permanently in March, and I celebrated by having Daniel and Aunt Margaret over for dinner at my cabin. My first dinner party in my own place. Daniel and I fell into a rhythm that felt both comfortable and exciting. We'd have dinner together most nights, alternating between my cabin and his. Weekends, we'd explore the mountains, finding new trails and frozen waterfalls. He taught me to ski that first winter, patient and encouraging, as I fell over and over, until finally, gloriously, I was gliding down the slopes beside him. Spring came, and with it, a proposal. We were at our waterfall, the place where Daniel had first kissed me, where we'd acknowledged what was growing between us. The ice had melted, and water was rushing, full and loud with snowmelt. We'd hiked up to have a picnic, and we were sitting on a flat rock, eating sandwiches and watching the water. "Clara," Daniel said, setting down his sandwich and taking my hand, "I have something to ask you." My heart started racing because I knew, somehow, I knew what was coming. "We've known each other 6 months now," he said. "Some people might say that's not long enough, but I've learned something in my life, that time isn't measured in days or months. It's measured in moments, in connections, in the depth of what you feel." He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple gold ring with a small diamond. "Clara Bennett, I love you more than I thought I could love anyone. You brought light back into my life when I thought I'd be dark forever. You make me laugh, make me think, make me want to be better. Will you marry me? Will you build a life with me here in these mountains, in this town we both love?" I was crying and laughing at the same time. "Yes," I said. "Yes, of course, yes." He slipped the ring onto my finger, and we kissed there by the waterfall. The sound of rushing water, our soundtrack. The spring sunshine warm on our faces. We were married in June, on the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. It was a small wedding in the town church, with the whole community in attendance. Aunt Margaret stood beside me as my matron of honor. Daniel's sister came from Maine to stand up with him. Pastor Wilson performed the ceremony, speaking about love and second chances and the grace of new beginnings. I wore a simple white dress and carried wildflowers from the mountains. Daniel wore a suit he'd bought specially for the occasion and cried when he saw me walking down the aisle. We exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, promising to love and support and grow with each other, to honor both our pasts and our future together. The reception was at the community center, with food brought by half the town, music played by local musicians, and dancing that lasted until midnight. We cut a cake that Martha Henderson had made, toasted with champagne, and danced our first dance to "The Way You Look Tonight." "Mrs. Hayes," Daniel whispered as we swayed together, "I love you." "Mr. Hayes," I replied, "I love you too, so much." We honeymooned for a week at a cabin on Lake Champlain, spending lazy days, reading and hiking and making love and planning our future. We talked about the house we wanted to build, sketching rough ideas on napkins, dreaming out loud. 3 bedrooms, I said, just in case. "Just in case of what?" Daniel asked, grinning. "You know what," I said, blushing. "Kids," he said, pulling me close. "You want kids?" "Maybe," I admitted. "Someday. Do you?" "With you? Absolutely," Daniel said. "I'd love to have a family with you." We started trying that summer, and I got pregnant in October. Our daughter, Sarah Margaret, named for Daniel's first wife and my aunt, both of whom had shaped our lives so profoundly, was born in July of 1974. Daniel was in the delivery room with me, holding my hand. coaching my breathing, crying when Sarah took her first breath and let out her first wail. He cut the cord with shaking hands, and when they placed Sarah in his arms, I watched his face transform with love. "She's perfect," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "Clara, she's perfect." "She is," I agreed, my voice breaking, exhausted and happy and overwhelmed with love for this tiny person we created. Parenthood was harder than I expected and more wonderful than I could have imagined. Sarah was a good baby, but she was still a baby, waking at all hours, needing constant attention, making messes and noise and chaos. But Daniel was an incredible father, patient and involved, changing diapers and doing midnight feedings and singing off-key lullabies that somehow always worked. The library was understanding about maternity leave, and when I went back part-time after 3 months, Daniel adjusted his workshop hours to be home with Sarah. We traded off, creating a schedule that worked for both of us, making it work because we were a team. Our son, Michael Daniel, was born 2 years later, in 1976. He was different from Sarah, more demanding, louder, constantly in motion from the moment he could crawl. Daniel and I were outnumbered now, juggling 2 small children and 2 careers, but we managed, supporting each other, taking turns, finding moments of connection and intimacy amid the chaos of young parenthood. We started building our house in 1978, when Sarah was 4 and Michael was 2. Daniel designed it himself, a beautiful 2-story home with large windows, a wraparound porch, and yes, the big kitchen I dreamed of. He did most of the work himself, with help from friends in town. And I'd bring the kids by after library hours to watch the progress. It took 2 years to complete, but in the summer of 1980, we moved in. Our own house, built with Daniel's hands and our combined dreams, sitting on 5 acres of mountain land with views that took my breath away. The years in that house were golden. We hosted Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas parties. We had a big garden where the kids helped plant vegetables. We adopted a dog, a golden retriever named Honey, who the kids adored. We lived simply but richly, surrounded by community and love. Aunt Margaret remained a constant presence in our lives until she passed peacefully in 1985 at the age of 83. She died in her sleep, in the house where she'd welcomed me that first desperate December. At the funeral, I thanked her, wherever she was, for saving my life, for giving me a place to heal, for supporting me and Daniel from the very beginning. The library thrived under my care. I started a children's reading program that became hugely popular. I brought in authors for talks. I expanded the collection, adding audiobooks and large print, and eventually, in the 1990s, computers. The library became a hub of community activity, a place where people gathered not just for books, but for connection. Daniel's woodworking business grew too. He became known throughout Vermont for his custom furniture, his beautiful craftsmanship, He trained apprentices, taught workshops, became a mentor to young people interested in the craft. But he never got too busy to have dinner with his family, to coach Sarah's soccer team, to teach Michael how to use tools safely. Sarah grew into a thoughtful, artistic child who loved books as much as I did. She'd spend hours in the library after school, reading in the corner, helping shelve books, listening to stories. Michael was more active, always outside, always building something or taking something apart. Both were bright and kind and funny, and Daniel and I watched them grow with pride and wonder. The children knew about their father's first wife. We talked about Sarah, about how she'd loved Daniel, about how she'd wanted him to find happiness again. We showed them photos, told them stories, made sure they understood that love isn't limited, that you can honor the past while celebrating the present. "Did you love her more than Mom?" Sarah asked once when she was about 8, curious but not upset. "I loved her differently," Daniel said honestly. "She was my first love, my young love. Your mom is my second chance love, my grown-up love. They're both real, both important. Sarah made me believe in love. Your mom made me believe in second chances." But children understood, as much as children can, and they grew up secure in the knowledge that they were loved, wanted, treasured. The 1990s brought graduations and college applications, and the bittersweet experience of watching our children leave. Sarah went to college in Boston. "Full circle," she said, "to the city where I'd once been so unhappy." She studied English and library science, following in my footsteps. Michael went to Vermont Technical College for engineering, wanting to build things like his father, but on a larger scale. Daniel and I became empty nesters, adjusting to the quiet house, rediscovering each other without the constant demands of parenting. We traveled to England and France, to the Southwest, to places we'd always dreamed of seeing. We took long hikes and lazy mornings in bed and dinner dates in town. "We're pretty good at this," Daniel said one evening as we sat on our porch, watching the sunset, honey at our feet. "At what?" I asked. "Being married," he said. "Being partners. We've made a good life, Clara." "We have," I agreed. Taking his hand. The best life. The new millennium brought grandchildren. Sarah married a kind man named Patrick, a high school English teacher, and they had twins in 2002, Emma and Jack. Michael married his college sweetheart, Lisa, and they had a daughter, Rose, in 2004. Being grandparents was everything wonderful about parenting, with less of the stress. We had the twins and Rose for weekends and summer weeks, teaching them about the mountains, about books, about working with wood. Daniel built them a treehouse in our yard, an elaborate structure with multiple rooms and a slide. I read them stories and taught them to bake and took them to the library for special grandmother, granddaughter, grandson time. Daniel retired from woodworking in 2010 at 73, his hands finally showing the effects of decades of skilled labor. But he couldn't quite stop. He had a small shop at home where he made toys for the grandkids, picture frames for friends, small things that brought him joy, without the pressure of deadlines or customers. I retired from the library in 2012 at 66, ready to pass the torch to a younger librarian who brought new ideas and energy. My retirement party filled the library, people coming to share stories of how I'd impacted their lives, how I'd helped them find the perfect book, how the library had been their sanctuary because I'd made it welcoming. Retirement suited us both. We spent our days reading and gardening, taking slow walks with Honey. We were on Honey the third by then. Visiting with friends, enjoying the grandchildren. We were slowing down, our bodies not quite as cooperative as they'd once been, but we were together, and that was what mattered. December 2022 marked 50 years since we met. 50 years since I'd walked into that general store, heartbroken and lost, and dropped my scarf. 50 years since Daniel had picked it up and smiled at me and changed my life forever. Our children and grandchildren threw us a huge anniversary party at the community center. There were speeches and photos and a video someone had made of our life together. Sarah read a letter she'd written, thanking us for being examples of what love should look like. Michael presented us with a bench he'd designed and built himself, with our names and anniversary date carved into it, to be placed at the waterfall where Daniel had proposed. 50 years, Daniel said in his speech, his voice still strong despite his 75 years. People ask me what the secret is to a long marriage, and I always say the same thing: choose each other. Every single day, in big ways and small ways, choose each other. Choose to be kind when you're tired. Choose to listen when you'd rather talk. Choose to forgive when you're hurt. Choose to see the best in each other, even on the worst days. He looked at me, his gray eyes still kind, still loving. Clara chose me when I was broken. I chose her when she was grieving. And every day since then, we've kept choosing each other. That's the secret. That's everything. I couldn't speak, too overcome with emotion, but I stood and took his hand, and everyone applauded. We're 78 and 75 now, Daniel and I. Our bodies are showing wear. His knees are bad from years of climbing and building. My eyesight isn't what it was, but we're still here, still together, still in love. We sit on our porch most evenings in summer, watching the sunset over the mountains, holding hands, comfortable in the silence that comes from decades of companionship. We talk about the kids and grandkids, about books and news and memories. We remember that first Christmas, that desperate December when two broken people found each other and started healing. Do you ever regret it? I asked him recently. Choosing this life? Choosing me? Daniel looked at me like I'd said the most ridiculous thing he'd ever heard. Regret you? Clara, loving you is the best thing I ever did. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. That Christmas when you walked into town, that was the day my life really began. Mine too, I said, squeezing his hand. Last Christmas, we started a new tradition. Every Christmas Eve, we drive up to the waterfall. Someone else drives now, usually Sarah or Michael, our night vision not being what it once was. We stand there in the cold, at the place where Daniel first kissed me, where he proposed, where our love story really began. And we make a promise. The same promise we've made for 50 Christmases now. I choose you, Daniel says, taking both my hands in his, today, tomorrow, and for all the days we have left. I choose you, Clara Hayes. I choose you, I reply, my voice steady despite my tears. Today, tomorrow, and forever. I choose you, Daniel Hayes. It's called the Snowfall Promise because that first Christmas, it was snowing when we made it. Snow falling soft and silent while we pledged ourselves to each other, while we chose love over fear, hope over despair, future over past. Our children and grandchildren know the story. How Grandma Clara came to Pine Haven heartbroken and lost. How Grandpa Daniel had closed his heart after losing his first wife. How a dropped scarf in a general store brought them together. How they chose each other every single day for 50 years. Tell us again, the grandchildren always ask. Tell us about the Snowfall Promise. And we do. We tell them about that magical Christmas, about finding love when we weren't looking for it, about healing together, about building a life and a family and a legacy. We tell them so they'll understand that love isn't just about the happy times. It's about choosing each other through the hard times too. It's about showing up day after day, even when it's difficult. Will you make the Snowfall Promise with me when I'm grown up? Little Rose asked last Christmas, and everyone laughed. But there were tears too. I hope you find someone worth making that promise to. I told her, someone who chooses you just as much as you choose them. Someone who makes you laugh and supports your dreams and holds your hand through the scary parts. That's what love is, sweetheart. Choosing each other. This Christmas, as I sit by our fire in the house Daniel built with his own hands, watching snow fall softly outside, I find myself thinking about that girl I was 50 years ago. So broken, so certain she'd never be whole again. And I wish I could go back and tell her, it's going to be okay, more than okay. You're going to find love again. You're going to build a beautiful life. You're going to be so happy. But maybe she needed to go through that darkness to appreciate the light. Maybe we both did, Daniel and I. Maybe that's why our love was so strong, because we both known the depths of loss and chose to risk love anyway. Tomorrow, Daniel and I will make the Snowfall Promise again. 51 Christmases together. 51 years of choosing each other. And if we're lucky enough to have more years ahead, we'll keep making that promise. Keep choosing. Keep loving. Because that's what the Snowfall Promise means. It means love isn't passive, it's active. It's a choice. Every single day, we choose each other. And that choice, made day after day, year after year, creates something beautiful and lasting and strong enough to weather any storm. My name is Clara Hayes. I'm 78 years old, and I want you to know that it's never too late for love. It's never too late for healing. It's never too late for second chances. If you're hurting right now, if you're grieving, if you feel like happiness is impossible, I'm here to tell you it's not. Healing takes time. It takes patience. It takes courage. But it's possible. I'm living proof. And if you're lucky enough to find someone who chooses you, who sees you at your worst and loves you anyway, who holds your hand through the dark times and celebrates with you in the good times, hold on to them. Choose them back. Every single day, choose them. That's my Snowfall promise to you, dear listener. That love is worth the risk, that healing is possible, that second chances are real, that Christmas miracles aren't about magic. They're about two people choosing to believe in hope and love and each other. Rest now. Let this story settle into your heart like soft snow. Let it remind you that you are worthy of love, that your story isn't over, that beautiful chapters are still ahead if you're brave enough to turn the page. Sleep peacefully. Dream of mountains and snowfall and promises kept. Dream of love that heals and lasts and makes all the hard times worth it. And remember, choose love, choose hope, choose life. Every single day, make that choice. Merry Christmas, dear friend. May you find your own Snowfall Promise. May you build your own beautiful life. May you know the joy of being chosen and choosing in return. Good night. Rest well. And may all your Christmases be filled with love.